And welcome to Salon Talks. I'm Dean Obeidallah, and today we have with us in studio Congressman Mikie Sherrill from New Jersey's 11th District, which is my home state. She serves on the House Armed Services Committee and House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Congresswoman Sherrill, it's great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, a little over 100 days in. This is a human level. Is it worth it? Was it worth all the sacrifice, going out knocking on doors? When you really look back at this 100 days, like, what is your real takeaway as a person? Forget politics.
Well, it's really funny you say that because I've talked about this with some members of Congress. In fact, I don't know if you followed the race down in, I think it's North Carolina 9 with Dan McCready. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, because of election fraud, he is still running for Congress.
Yes.
And he came to Washington to talk to some of the veterans like myself who, we'd run together to ask how it was. And we were saying, oh, you wouldn't believe this, and this isn't working right. And, this is, really not the focus we need in Congress, and people aren't supporting the American people, and this, and this. And he almost looked a little taken aback and said, oh, well, do you like it? And we said, oh, yeah, it's great. This is why we ran for Congress. I think in an odd way, especially with veterans who want to engage in a proactive fight for justice and fight for the good of the country, this is exactly what we signed up for. And in an odd way, I think with how difficult it was to run and how hard it is to take time away from your families, I think if I had gotten down there and everything was working smoothly, I'd kind of be thinking, well, why did I do all this?
And that's an interesting point. And maybe there was a time, the old days of politics, people would just go to Washington, you go along and get along, and things are different. But before we get into policy stuff, I want to touch on your background, because people don't know you. It's very unique. You're a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. You flew helicopters for 10 years in active duty, then went to law school, then was in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now you're in Congress. Where does this desire to do public service come from in your life?
Maybe Catholic guilt. I just feel I do. I've always felt like in a democracy, and this is how I was raised in a democracy as a citizen. It's your duty to be working hard for the agenda of the country. You're responsible. Each and every one of us is responsible. And for many years, that to me meant staying informed and voting for a candidate that represented what you thought was going to be the best for the country.
Right.
But in this past cycle, so many of the ideals I'd fought for felt like they were under attack. Not just things like, the Muslim ban or treating our Gold Star families and our public servants and former POWs poorly, but also just the fact that, Congress didn't seem to be asserting its constitutional responsibility. Congress people were not acting like they were part of a co-equal branch of government. And so I was trying to think of how I could help the democracy and engage in it. It felt like I needed to do more than simply staying informed and vote.
I have it since Paul Ryan never read Article 1 of the Constitution. They created Article 1 was Congress. There was a reason the framers wanted the Congress to be Article 1, because that was to them the most important. And it was completely forfeited. And it's great to see you guys picking it up now. And you have a new class of members of Congress, about 66, 67 new Democrats elected. The really progressive ones get a lot of the press. You are in a swing district, a real swing district in New Jersey. How does that impact the way you approach being in Congress, as opposed to being in an extremely blue district, which you can be as progressive as you want?
I think you just have to be incredibly thoughtful about where the issues are that you can build bridges and get past. And I think it's not just about the fact that I'm in a swing district, but about the fact that we are now operating in divided government. And it's not enough for me to think, oh, if we win in 2020 and get the Senate, we can pass legislation. I've talked to people in my district. I've heard from other members of Congress who represent districts across the country. People are suffering now, and Congress needs to address these issues now. And the way we do that in divided government is building broad coalitions.
Is there real chance for bipartisanship? I mean, you have Speaker Pelosi's going to meet with Donald Trump about infrastructure. And there are liberals on Twitter going, don't meet with him. He's horrible. You're validating
Oh, no, she's got to meet with him. She's got to talk about the Gateway Tunnel project.
Well, that's it, because you're in Jersey, the Gateway Tunnel. If you don't know, folks, if you don't know the Gateway Tunnel, that is the issue in Jersey, where Chris Christie, the former governor of Jersey, now we have Phil Murphy, screwed up everything and did not take the funding he should have to build the corridor. And you can speak to it more. Why is it so important? And we've talked about it before. To you, it's a national issue. It's not just a New Jersey issue.
It's critical. It's we have 2 rail tunnels in and out of Manhattan, one in, one out, and that's it from North Jersey. And we have a portal bridge, which is a swing bridge. It gets stuck.
Yeah.
There's signal problems. People get delayed in work. It's getting worse and worse and worse. We just had a study that showed that if one of those tunnels goes down, it's a $16 billion loss of revenue over the next 4 years. And that's to our country. That's not something that's just going to impact New York and New Jersey. That's going to impact every state in the nation.
So you want Speaker Pelosi to meet with Donald Trump and talk about those issues. And I imagine navigating that and you want results. The people who elected you want results. I'm not saying the real progressive ones in districts that are very, very blue don't want results. But I think maybe they have the freedom to say, don't work with Speaker Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi, do not work at all with Donald Trump. Do not work with him on anything because of his history, his rhetoric of bigotry and sexism. But in your district, you don't have that luxury. It's about really, your people want you to do something, at least show you're doing the work and making an effort.
I don't think I have that luxury, but I don't think the American people have that luxury. There are too many things that Congress has to act on, and they have to act on now. Right. And I think we can build broad bipartisan support for bringing down prescription drug costs. We just passed VAWA legislation, the Violence Against Women Act. We just reauthorized it. They did not do that in the 115th Congress. We just did that, and we had 33 Republicans voting with us despite strong opposition from the NRA. So think about that.
Why would the NRA, can you explain to us why the NRA would oppose Violence Against Women Act?
Because we closed what's called the boyfriend loophole. And we said that if you have been convicted, not just accused, convicted of domestic abuse, then you cannot have access to a firearm.
And they didn't like that.
No. Well, the NRA didn't, but 33 Republicans, along with the majority of the country, understand how critical it is to support, gun safety legislation. And so that's the kind of broad bipartisanship that we worked on there. And I think, we can build in the Senate and hopefully get passed by the president.
We talked during your campaign, you were not going to support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. How has she been now? We're about 100 days in. What's your take on her?
Well, I think she's been doing a great job. I think she's held our caucus together, and sometimes I call it a raucous caucus.
That's a very good way of putting it, because
it's a little cute, but it's very descriptive. But it's also a wonderful place to be. When you're on the floor of the House of Representatives in the Democratic caucus, I like to say it feels like New Jersey. It is, you have all different opinions, you have all different ideas. It feels innovative, it feels like the future. It feels like where our country's headed. But I think where our country needs to be headed is, like you said, pragmatic legislation, getting bipartisan support, building broad coalitions, and really moving forward in this country's agenda. And so that's something that I think the Speaker agrees with. She made a comment, and I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, if you want to just talk about stuff or message stuff, maybe Congress isn't the place for you. If you want to legislate, if you want to get legislation passed, this is where we do legislation.
At least in theory, because you have a Senate and Mitch McConnell is completely unresponsive to anything. So I want to talk about some policy issues, but there's one human issue I want to touch on. On Friday, Donald Trump tweeted out Congresswoman Omar's speech. It intercut it with images of 9/11, the building coming down. And on Sunday, Congressman Omar said, I've gotten a spike in death threats, and even Nancy Pelosi confirmed that. But Donald Trump on Monday continued to attack her, and last night was reported this morning, said she's very, very bad for the country. Yesterday saying she's hateful for America. What's your reaction to Donald Trump's attack on Congressman Omar, which she views, and many of us view, as inciting hate to different, it's not about politics, it's really inciting hate against her and other Muslims?
I was in the Navy, and I was at the headquarters of the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, and we had just had several months before 9/11 the bombing of the USS Cole.
Yeah.
And we had the families come to Norfolk to, and I remember this long night where we were trying to get word of who was alive and who wasn't, and the families waiting to hear if their child had died in that or if their loved one had died. And so we recovered from that, and we're moving forward as a Navy family, and then we hear that the World Trade Towers are attacked. We hear that the Pentagon's attacked. We heard all sorts of other things. We're trying to we're trying to scramble jets in the air, but there were no fly orders, and, trying to work through all of that stuff. And then I heard, people that I knew were either really harmed in the Pentagon attacks, or, I remember one guy that was so mad at his boss because he's trying to get his boss to a meeting, and his boss was, not leaving and late, and that side of the Pentagon was attacked. and they would have been killed.
Right.
And then after 9/11, we have people that joined our armed forces. A lot of the veterans today joined after 9/11, specifically because 9/11. A lot of the people I served with joined our armed services because of the attack on our American ideals and our values that the terrorists, attacked when they attacked the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon. And to see that weaponized, to see the way that's being weaponized against the very values that we fought to protect and are fighting to protect, that is completely uncalled for and really unacceptable, especially to those of us who feel very deeply about 9/11.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, 9/11, I was down in Lower Manhattan. I stood outside 8th Street and 6th Avenue and watched the second tower come down. And I could see people jumping from the windows. And the idea that you're going to have the use of that tragedy, and other politicians have used it, but in different ways. But to intercut images with a woman with a hijab who's Muslim giving a speech, to me, is so grotesquely craven. It's so cruel. And he even continues to double down after death threats to me. There's no level to me. There's no bottom to Donald Trump. It's not about politics. It's not left-right anymore. I have a lot of respect for Republicans. We disagree, but I have respect for them. For Donald Trump, the bottom concerns me. I don't know what 2020 will bring. If this is a preview of where we're going in 2020, him now threatening to get migrants and drive them in sanctuary cities, in his view, not to help them, but to punish elected officials in blue cities and blue states. What's your reaction, Donald Trump, weaponizing the use of migrants to punish political adversaries?
Well, I was really pleased. As we had talked about Congress needing to stand up and be a co-equal branch of government, a lot of people, are asking me, because I'm actually really hopeful about the future of this country, and a lot of times people ask the question, why? What are you so hopeful about?
Right.
And I'll tell you, I entered Congress when the government was shut down. It was we were the first class to ever enter in a government shutdown. It was a horrible government shutdown. It was our longest one. As you may recall, our airports and the local airports were shut down for a couple hours finally. But we, Congress, reopened government with bipartisan, bicameral legislation. We with a veto-proof majority. That's the kind of thing I think we're seeing in Congress, and we're seeing Congress stand up. And now Congress needs to act on different issues related to the border. And part of that legislation was saying, look, border security includes taking care of our ports of entry. Like we have some of the largest ports of entry in New Jersey. We just saw a huge cocaine bust, and we know fentanyl's coming through our ports of entry. That's where some of the border problems are coming from. If you're concerned about the southern border has gotten worse and worse with the policies of this administration, and if you want to end some of the illegal migration across the southern border, look at some of the most dangerous places on our planet, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. Look at investing in those countries to make sure that people are cared for. So they're not willing to take their children and go on an arduous journey with really not a very clear outcome.
Well, Trump's remedy is the old-fashioned wall, so we don't see what's really going on, not dealing with the actual cause. He wants to deal with the symptoms. And the long term, we know that's not the right way. So we're going to have this week the Mueller report released to us on some level.
Well, we're going to have some part of the Mueller report.
What do you expect to see? Just like the words, Trump innocent on it, or, Trump exonerated, and that's the only two words we're going to see. I mean, as a member of Congress, what do you really expect to see that Bill Barr will allow us to see?
Well, I think it'll be interesting. We know that even from the Barr report, the couple pages that he put out on the report, that there were some Russians that were indicted. We know there's information in the report on how the Russians hacked into the heart of our democracy, our election system, and that's why I think it's so important that Congress get the unredacted report, because it's Congress's constitutional duty to have oversight responsibility. They need to protect our country. They need to protect our election system. I should say, I'm saying they, like I'm still right. We need to protect our country. We need to protect our election system. That's our duty.
Sure.
And so I think we'll see what the report comes out with. I hope we find out more information. I hope there's transparency. We need that as a country because we need some faith in our government. And then we need that as a Congress to protect our democracy.
There's no reason that at least the House Intel and Senate Intel committees do not get the entire report unredacted. So then we can all have confidence that the redacted version is just cutting out grand jury testimony or national security issues or things during open investigations.
Right.
Not political things.
To protect the privacy of citizens, but you're exactly right. The Intel committees should have access to ensure that we in Congress understand how our democracy was hacked into and prevent that from ever happening again.
And let's talk about a few key issues. One that really impacts New Jersey and every blue state with high taxes. That was the Trump GOP tax plan / scam, which capped state and local tax deductions at $10,000. You said tax day this week. What are you hearing from people in New Jersey?
People in New Jersey are just, I'd say they're furious, but I think it just goes beyond that to a sense of, how are we going to stay here in New Jersey? How are we going to continue to pay these taxes? How are we going to save for our retirement? How are we going to save for our children's future? And at the same time, we have some of the best public school systems in the nation. We have some of the best educated, we have one of the best educated workforces in the nation. It's no accident that despite the high cost of living in North Jersey, we have a lot of corporations headquartered there doing some very skilled work because of the great population of workers we have. But that's because we invest in our schools. That's because we invest in our communities. That's because we invest in our towns. New Jersey is kind of a success story in some areas. We do need to bring the cost of living down, don't get me wrong. But it's a success area in a lot of ways, and to undercut that and to undercut what we're trying to do and how we're trying to move forward in New Jersey with this tax plan is just a huge blow.
You had tweeted using the term punish, that they were punishing. When you say punish, did you mean like Trump and the GOP are punishing blue states because you are, again, politically, we are not supportive of this president? Or what did you mean by punish?
Well, I meant that every single piece of legislation coming out of Congress and this administration hurts New Jersey. Yeah. And so I didn't mean punish in the sense of, strictly speaking, going after every single New Jerseyan, but in a broader sense of, there seems to be some retribution for running a great public school system or trying to invest in the most critical piece of infrastructure in the nation, in the Gateway Tunnel project. And make no mistake, New York and New Jersey have put incredible sums of money into this, but this is a federal government project. This is one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the nation with some of the most economic, some of the real economic importance, I should say, to the rest of the nation. And I even went to talk to the minority leader, Kevin McCarthy, about this. And I said, even the conservatives in my district think we need to spend on the Gateway Tunnel project. And he said, well, yeah, that's what government does. This is what government does. This is what we need government to do.
We have to talk to Mitch McConnell, I think, at this point. I don't know where you can find Mitch McConnell. He's hiding most of the time.
Or his wife, Elaine Chao, to release our money.
So you, in the House, you recently passed the Paycheck Fairness Act to close the gap in pay that women make 80 cents to $1 of men, and women of color, African-American women, is more like 60 cents, and Latino women is in the 50% area. I think that was so great. Only 7 Republicans joined in that vote. Is it surprising that you can't have wide bipartisan support for closing the gender pay gap in this country?
It's really surprising because we do have wide bipartisan support for New
Jersey.
In New Jersey, in our state legislature, I think there were only 2 people that voted against it in the entire Senate and Assembly. So it is surprising to me that Washington is so partisan because in New Jersey, we know how to build broad coalitions around support for the people in our state. And that's why I've said so many times through my campaign and now, that I'm in office, that New Jersey really is a model for the rest of the country.
Take that, Jersey, the greatest state in America. Right here. 2 Jersey people are telling you, Bruce Springsteen, Frank Sinatra, one day the Gateway Tunnel, Chris Christie's not there anymore.
School system,
a lot of good,
our great unions.
You're a veteran. You've been outspoken. We've talked before about your advocacy for veterans. And you recently wrote a letter to the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Robert Wilkie, about implementing programs that are embracing the needs of female veterans. Tell us what is going on. What led you to write that letter? And what is the VA right now not addressing that female veterans need?
So one of the fastest growing populations, as you can imagine, is a group of female veterans. And because the VA hasn't traditionally served a lot of female veterans, they just haven't kind of caught up to the times. And there's this argument that they don't that they don't have the population coming to the VA, but part of that is because they don't have the services for that population to then come and get the medical help they need. And a lot of women veterans don't identify as veterans. They've had some bad experiences sometimes, military sexual assault and trauma. Sometimes they've had, they try to put that behind them, but we find that once they do get in touch with the VA and start to receive those services, they can have some very good outcomes. But we found, and this was something we held veterans roundtables, a lot of military women veterans roundtables to come talk about the specific things we were seeing in New Jersey. So, for example, there was a waiting room that was sort of like a gauntlet for women. They would come in and guys would be hanging out there and make remarks and make them very uncomfortable. So we changed around the waiting room. That actually happened. I did not do that. The Veterans Roundtable helped to get that done. We also have complaints now that women who don't go outside the veterans facility because they don't have mammograms or they don't have some of the OB facilities, the VA is really slow at paying their bills. So some of them, their credit has suffered because the VA didn't pay their medical bills. We've had, women that have small children that are homeless, that can't get homeless shelters that'll care for women with small children. That's a little bit outside the medical system, but still taking care of our veterans. These are all the things that our women veterans are facing right now. And we were seeing it in New Jersey, and so the New York Times came out with an article saying this is going on nationwide. And so that's when I wrote the letter to say, look, this isn't just a New Jersey issue. This is a nationwide issue that the VA has to attack.
And have you gotten a response? Do you get a sense they're going to listen and accommodate the concerns?
I haven't gotten a response. I think they're going through it now. I have a sense they will listen, and if they don't, I have a sense that now in the Democratic caucus we have enough veterans and we have enough people with a national security background that this will be a key focus.
Maybe you can ask for Trump's tax returns while doing this at the same time. And by the way, we like Trump's tax returns. So health care is likely going to be the key issue in 2020 election. And Donald Trump, on some way, made it that way with the DOJ now saying they're in court arguing to strike the entire ACA, meaning the ending of coverage for pre-existing health conditions, putting caps back on insurance policies, throwing kids off for 26. But Trump tells us, don't worry about it. I can protect you, and you can trust me. Should the families of America trust Donald Trump with their health care?
Well, I think, we've seen constant attacks, especially over the last couple of years, on the Affordable Care Act. Yeah. And they haven't been Republicans haven't been successful in overturning it, and I think it's because they haven't successfully enunciated what their vision for health care is. There was the repeal and replace mantra, but I think Americans quickly realized it was just repeal. Yeah. There was no replacement plan, and that scares families. That scares me.
Sure.
Because we see too many people in New Jersey, and I'm sure across the country, who just don't have the coverage they need. And I tell people in my district, it was Ronald Reagan that said, look, this is a right. Healthcare is a right. Everybody has a right to be seen at the emergency room. And so he started this pathway. Now, unfortunately, as this has grown, we see too many people using emergency room care. It's the most expensive. It's the least effective. We have to get in this country into a health system where we have everyone covered, they get preventative care, and we start to drive costs down.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's such an issue that touches people. And pre-existing conditions, now, everyone's an adult has a pre-existing condition. We all have something. And I
think if you're born a woman, you have a pre-existing
condition. Exactly. And pregnancy was considered a pre-existing condition if you were pregnant once before and no coverage. So but as we wrap up here, we're 100 days in to Congress. What do you look forward to the next 100 days? What do you want? Like, we come back in 100 days, we sit down here, Congresswoman, and you say, this was our goals, and this is what we achieved in the House.
Well, I think we are going to see some great things now coming out of committees. So we put some great legislation on the floor. I talked a little bit, I'm not sure if I even mentioned H.R. 1 with voter transparency and voting rights, H.R. 8, universal background checks for gun purchases with carve-outs for hunters and personal protection, passing the VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. So we've seen some great stuff coming out. Now there's work being done in committees, and I think we're going to see some great legislation passed on bringing down healthcare costs, on bringing down prescription drug costs. we're working hard, and I'm on the House Armed Services Committee to make sure that not only are we getting a good National Defense Authorization Act passed, but we're working hard to get an audit out of the DoD. That won't happen in this cycle, but we are working towards how we all make that happen and have greater transparency in how our money is being spent, especially in the Department of Defense. So these are all things that we're working towards. I think we're going to continue to see some great movement, and I'm pretty excited, like I said, for the future of where this country's headed.
And I'm so thankful that you and the other Democrats have control of the House of Representatives so we can see what the framers intended, that you have co-equal branches and you have oversight and checks and balances. I want to thank Congressman Mikie Sherrill for being here, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Dean Obeidallah. See you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.